Culturally Illiterate, a podcast where four friends overthink comic book movies. I'm one of your hosts, Jake, and my family puts poems on our Christmas gifts, and we try to guess what they are based on the poems. And one time when I was a kid, I got a Nightcrawler action figure for Christmas, and the poem written by my father read, "He poofs here, he poofs there, he poofs in your underwear." With me are my friends and fellow co-hosts.
My name's Jason. I forgot about that. That was a thing that I remembered, but I forgot about that, Jake. That kind of just made me lose track of everything. I'm Jason, and I forgot my fun fact because now I'm thinking about Nightcrawler. So if I remember it,
put it in your underwear.
If I remember it, will come back to me.
My name is Matt. Hi.
Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Oh God. And my name's Sean. My fun fact is that I'm stuck with someone eternally forever now.
Woo! Everyone, congratulate Sean.
Sucks
Congrats,
to be
Shawnee,
you,
baby.
Sean. It sucks to be you.
Jesus Christ.
Damn. He hates marriage. He hates love.
Matt hates marriage.
He's jealous.
Well, I'm very happy for you, Sean, because I love you.
Of course.
Thanks. I love you too.
I think even Matt is. He's just grumpy.
And as well, I'm also happy for your now fiance, because, as that goes, it's both of you. Both of you to be happy for.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the part where we merge together into one living creature, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm the top half.
Voltron.
That's kind of hype. You're gonna have a Megazord, right? Isn't that's kind of the gig when you get married, right?
Yeah, that's how it works. You kind of Megazord together afterwards. That's what they mean when they say you have to consummate the wedding. You just kind of morph together.
That is so tight. I'm so happy that you're gonna morph with someone.
It's morphin' time. Can you say that at your wedding?
Time.
Oh, I have ideas now. Anyway, we're gonna leave that ominous. So I wanted to real quick wreck a couple things today. One, relating to James Marsden, who starred in the movie we're going to be talking about. Well, sort of starred. He got the short end of the stick in this whole trilogy because we're covering X-Men: The Last Stand. But he doesn't get the short end of the stick in this show, Jury Duty. It was originally on Prime, but now I don't think it is because it was on something called Freevee, and it just was also on Prime. But basically, if you like the kind of dry, awkward humor of your workplace comedies, Parks and Rec, The Office, Superstore, that kind of thing, it's like that, but with a jury duty. Except the twist is it's all fake except one person thinks he's actually in jury duty, and everybody else is actors, and it's filming his and documenting his response to weird scenarios that come up in this sequestered jury. And everyone's not playing themselves except James Marsden, who is in the show as an obnoxious version of James Marsden. And I highly recommend it. It's very good, and shout out Haley for putting me and Prayer onto it. And then also just real quick, because I suspect we're going to have... There's been a lot of talk this year in terms of animated comic book movies for Across the Spider-Verse and for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, deservedly so. Definitely watch those. But I just want to mention Nimona real quick that I watched the other night on Netflix, also based off of a comic. It is absolutely wonderful. Disney originally scrapped it because it was too gay when they bought 20th Century Fox and Blue Sky Studios, and then subsequently shut down a whole studio. They scrapped this movie because of the fact that it was basically about being non-binary, but it's fantastic, it's wonderful, and it's not going to get the hype just because of the fact that it was straight to streaming, but you should definitely check it out. Nimona.
Nice. I haven't heard of that.
I've seen a lot of buzz about it, and I've watched it. It is very, very good.
Yeah.
I have a rec.
I have a couple recs too, but you go ahead, Matt.
It should be short because I don't have the capacity for long sentences. Anyway... wait.
Long
okay, I remember my rec now. So, I recommend Futurama. It has been resurrected from the dead yet again, and it is streaming on Hulu. There have been 3 episodes that released so far. The first 2 were pretty good. The third one was a little topical, but still a solid episode. I'm very impressed that Futurama is back and that it's not bad. So give it a watch when you want to, or not. I don't give a shit.
I'm surprised that that's good. I've seen some stuff about it, and I was very iffy on it, but I'll believe Matt.
Believe Matt. Well, I have a couple.
Believe Matt.
I have a couple recs. First and foremost, there's a band that I think that I forgot to mention. If I did mention them already on a previous podcast, I apologize, but they're called Omerta. I've been meaning to recommend them on the podcast because I think they're sick and amazing, but I keep forgetting, I think. They're really, really good metal band. They only have like 9 songs out right now, which is kind of frustrating because I want to listen to more of them because I think they're an incredible band. Very unique in a time where I feel like a lot of metal bands are kind of going for a similar sound, and they're doing their own thing, and I really like it. It's rare that I get excited about metal bands, but I really, really like this band. So check them out if you like that shit. Anyway, I also recommend Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as Jake mentioned, and also the song that Charlie XCX put out on the Barbie soundtrack called Speed Drive, because Charlie XCX is beautiful, and it's a great song. It's called Speed Drive.
Did you also know that it is by Charlie XCX?
Yeah, it is. In case
I
you
hear
didn't
it's
know.
in Barbie.
Yeah.
I hear it's in Barbie.
Yeah, Charlie XCX actually made it for Barbie, and so
Oh, really?
so it was in Barbie.
It's made Speed Drive.
Called Speed Drive.
Charlie XCX made it.
I hate
Why'd
this
she
so
make it though? Do you know why she made it?
Oh yeah, it was
Like,
for
it
Barbie.
for anything? Oh, okay. Does this bit run into the ground yet? Do we
I
speed
think
drive this bit
so.
into the ground?
Jesus Christ.
That definitely is not as funny to anyone else as it is to us, but I don't give a shit.
I don't care. This whole podcast is for us. It's not for anyone else.
Exactly.
Of course.
It's for the boys.
Exactly.
Um,
Speaking of things that deserve, given James Marsden's slander in this movie, I'll give 2 recommendations of Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for being
Hell yeah.
decent video game movies that
Fact.
star James Marsden. They're definitely worth a watch.
Plus, the second one has a Kid Cudi song in it, which led to the video of Kid Cudi calling this little kid that loved that song and asking him. The kid was like, "Do you know Sonic?" And he was like, "Yeah, he just left my crib." Those were his exact words. It was adorable.
That is adorable.
Sweet.
So shout out to Sonic for that. Also, James Marsden's a great actor. Shout out James.
Let's bite the bullet and talk about this James Marsden movie, X-Men: The Last Stand. It
See,
was released
the
on,
thing is,
May
I wish it
26th
was a
of
James
2006.
Marsden movie.
Yeah, but he has like 2 scenes, and he's good in them. But he gets shafted. He gets dicked harder, I think, than we've watched anyone get dicked. In
It
any
sucks
of
because
these
he's
movies so
such a
far.
good actor, and he's like pretty perfect casting for Cyclops, I feel.
Oh,
and-
he'd be a wonderful Cyclops if he actually got
Yeah,
the
if they
chance.
actually like put
Used him.
Cyclops in the fucking movie.
Well, the first 2 movies, he's just kind of there to get like cucked by Wolverine, and I hate to use that term because of how many dumbass like right wingers like to throw it around, but like I don't know what else to describe it. He's just like he just kind of stands there
Yeah.
angrily while Wolverine like wants to have sex with his wife, and then in
Yeah,
this
he's
movie his
just,
wife
like-
just kills him.
Yeah, he's like just passive aggressive background man for the most part.
So this was written by Simon Kinberg and Zach Penn, directed by a man accused by at least 9 different people of sexual assault, and shot by Dante Spinotti.
You know what we should refer to him as? We should refer to him from this point
As a
onward
cunt?
as Rat Bastard. No, Rat Bastard.
Oh, that's good too.
I thought we came up with bitch rat turd.
Rat
I
is
thought
good
turd.
too,
I think
but
that's
I
what you
like
said last
I
week when we
like
recorded,
Rat.
Matt.
I
We
don't
did,
remember
we
that,
did,
but that's
but I
so
also-
funny.
I'm down for all of these. Bitch rat turd sounds hilarious.
Bitch Rat Turd. I like Rat Bastard. because you're
bastard.
Listen,
conversing
as
it.
long as we're
But
I'm
it's
gonna
still
refer to
so
that piece of
accurate.
shit as little as possible after this.
But as long as we're disrespecting his name, I'm okay with it, to be honest. Like, as long as we're showing him some kind of, like, fuck you, you know?
Oh, buddy. How's this for a transition? Speaking of respecting names, because one of this person's despicable actions include the sexual harassment and outing of Elliot Page on the set of this very movie, something corroborated by several witnesses, we would like to take a second to recommend donating to the National Center for Transgender Equality. You can visit www.transequality.org to learn more about trans identity, trans rights issues, and to donate. Also, if it's not already clear, we will not be dead naming Elliot Page here. If you do that, stop listening to us. We do not want your support. Elliot Page is a trans man, and Elliot Page is a man. To be clear, as the podcast goes on, Elliot Page does play a woman in this movie. So if you hear us using she, her pronouns, we're referring to his character, Kitty Pryde / Shadowcat, not him. Just wanted to make that crystal clear from the jump before we even get to cast list. Fuck transphobes, all that.
Yeah, also, Elliot Page is a great actor, so watch
Yes, he
Juno.
is.
Watch Juno, watch other shit that he's been in, and don't support the asshole that outed him on set, because fuck that.
Other than the casting that I guess we just mentioned of Elliot Page as Kitty Pryde / Shadowcat, returns with Patrick Stewart as Professor X, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, Rebecca Romijn as Mystique, Halle Berry as Storm, Famke Jensen as Jean Grey / the Phoenix, Anna Paquin as Rogue, James Marsden as Cyclops, Sean Ashmore as Iceman, Aaron Stanford as Pyro, Daniel Cudmore as Colossus, and adds Kelsey Grammer as Beast, Vinnie Jones as Juggernaut, Dania Ramirez as Callisto, Eric Dane as Multiple Man, Cameron Bright as Jimmy / Leech, and Ben Foster as Angel. So like a really fucking big cast, which I guess is fair. Not a problem for me.
Kelsey Grammer played Beast?
Yeah, Kelsey Grammer's Beast.
I just learned that right now.
Yeah, no, he's a pretty good Beast. So is the makeup. The makeup on right away. I just want to say the makeup on Beast is great.
Yeah.
I like his look in this.
Agreed. I just had no idea that was Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah, what do you know? The more you learn.
Like, you said that, and I was like, what the fuck? I know that name. But I didn't know
Yeah, a lot
that
of
face
people
when
do.
it was blue.
I guess that makes sense. So the movie opens with Charles Xavier and Eric Lensher in 1986 meeting a young Jean Grey at her parents' house to invite her to join their school at the X Mansion. Kind of forgot that this movie was de-aging actors with uncanny CGI before it was cool, with McKellen and Stewart here. But then 10 years later, in 1996, industrialist Warren Worthington II discovers his son is a mutant as he walks in on his son trying to cut off his own wings, which is pretty brutal and upsetting, in my opinion. It's like a disturbing display of self-harm. Next, in what's labeled as the not-too-distant future, we see the X-Men fighting Sentinels, and it turns out to be a Danger Room simulation. Tensions are high between the leaders of the team, Storm, Wolverine, and Cyclops, while the romantic relationship between Rogue and Iceman is on edge as Bobby seems to be growing close with Kitty Pryde. So I kind of feel like this movie actually comes out to a strong start. Like you seeing Eric and Charles like together fully for the first time in this flashback, and to see a young Jean is kind of immediately signals that this is something important. And then to go from that to something as jarring as Angel cutting off his own wings as a child, and then the Sentinel scene, even if it's kind of a fake out, I feel like it grab you. And to be honest, like I know we've already kind of I don't remember how much of this is on mic and how much of this is off, but we've already been bagging on this movie. But I do kind of think it has a strong, promising start that I almost like forget that I end up not liking it when it starts.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree. I do hate seeing the anti-aged Patrick Stewart and Ian. His last name is escaping me.
McKellen.
That's the one. I was gonna say Ian McKay, but that's a completely different Ian. But aside from that, I think it's a pretty good intro. As disturbing as the scene of the angel cutting his wings is, I think it's disturbing in a good way in that it's supposed to be, and I think it gets that across very well. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good intro to the movie. I think the training room scene is a bit corny, but
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this movie starts off on the right foot, but falters directly afterwards.
Shit goes
and not
left real
too
quick.
soon afterwards. It, like, I really like the scene with Angel, and I think that was a good starting point. It's definitely like a shocking thing to see, like, the effects that, you know, anti-mutant stuff can have on mutants in a way, and in turn can be a very good thematic scene to show. But like it's one good scene in a sea of a questionable movie.
That's just this movie in general, though. A good scene.
You know what?
With
That's-
under a sea of questionable.
that's the thing. It's like
behavior, scenes, script, writing.
Yeah, that's
absolute
every-
dog shit.
every good thing that I can say about that one like really poignant scene, I can say like 100 bad things about every other scene.
That's the
So
thing,
it's
though,
like-
is that they do a good job of basically showing the ramifications of I don't know how to say this, like mutants,
Bigotry, hate,
bigotry, hate, yes,
racism.
and how it resonates in families and can cause fractures in relationships. They do a good job of that. My problem with it is they did it with Angel, who has little to no presence for the rest of the movie after his second scene. You know what I'm saying? He has little to no presence until the very end, and I don't even think he says anything.
Yeah, he has. I feel like these movies have a real issue with like introducing really important characters with really important plot points, but then not being in the movie that much.
It's
Like Cyclops and Jean.
Yeah, that's such a good point, right? Where they basically, a movie is about just being proud of who you are, right? That the mutant genetic is not an illness that needs to be cured,
Well,
right?
yeah, like
And a perfect personification of that is Angel's backstory.
Yeah,
because
his
he
character
is the
arc
one.
is the perfect theme of the movie.
Yeah,
It should be at the
it
forefront,
is.
but he's barely
Yeah,
in it.
because exactly the thing is that at the beginning we saw that how ashamed he was of being a mutant, which then like becomes a problem the next scene, because all of a sudden he's proud, although he does have like some like second thoughts about having like the quote unquote cure.
Yeah,
right?
well, that's the one big moment with him. Other than he shows up a little bit in the climax, but I do like his big moment of like seconds before receiving the cure that his dad created, flying out the window, like breaking free and flying out the window is pretty cool. That's a good moment.
But that's it. Like,
Yeah, but
that's all he gets.
Yeah.
He should be more prominent in the movie because he embodies the themes of the movie better. But
Yeah,
no,
he
this movie is called Dark Phoenix, and unfortunately, the
It's
movie
not
It's not
called
called
Dark
Dark
Phoenix. It's
Phoenix.
called The Last Stand.
Oh,
But it's
whoops.
about-
It's an
it's
I'm
a- it's
thinking
an
of the other
adaptation
shitty
of the
movie.
Dark Phoenix saga.
Is the
Which
yes,
it
is
shouldn't be.
very
Exactly,
poorly
it's an
and loosely,
adaptation.
I would
and
assume.
unfortunately, it has to have Dark Phoenix, even though in the end she means fuck all to the plot, and it's just meant to, I don't know, have more Wolverine scenes in the movie.
No, it's just like, I don't know, like you would know more than me because I don't know that much about the comics and the source, but like the Dark Phoenix saga is like a pretty drawn out long event, right? Like it was like multiple spanning things.
That's actually what I was
Right.
about to get into. Like the X-Men comics, I mean, comic books in general are very much soap operas. They're this like extended serialized stories about with like heightened drama and a lot of it's interpersonal drama. But the X-Men, like nothing, like the two most defining like words to describe X-Men comics are like soapy and gay. And throughout Chris Claremont's run on various X books over a decade across several titles, the Dark Phoenix saga was built up to over years, and then it actually happened over the course of hundreds of issues and years. And this kind of circles back to what we talked about in our Daredevil episode, with them trying to shove the Elektra saga into one movie plus other elements. This is doing the same thing. You're talking about a movie, this is like an hour and 44-minute runtime, and they're trying to shove just years and years and years and years of comics into one movie. And they didn't even just stop at doing the Dark Phoenix saga, they also added the Mutant Cure storyline all into this. And as a result, you have things like Cyclops getting killed off 27 minutes into a movie about
Yeah,
the Phoenix.
and like obviously it's like when you're adapting it to film, you want to make it more concise, but you still have to develop the characters to fit that plot. Like, Jean had barely any character arc in the first two movies. Then she dies at the end of the second one. It's like, wow, that would have been a really impactful scene if she had been in the movies more and had more character development. And it's like all of a sudden she's back in this one, and it's like, I don't really give a fuck, because who is this bitch? Because we barely got to know her in the first two movies. And now all of a sudden you're developing all these things with her that center around this stark change in her personality, and the Phoenix taking over, and it's like, well, we didn't see the real Jean that much. So how is this supposed to affect the viewer in an impactful way at all?
The only time Jean got any kind of character development in the X-Men trilogy is when she was near death and when she was basically at death.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Basically,
It's
yeah.
like the only time I felt like we really had a good emotional connection to her character was her death scene. And it's like, well, now it's too little too late. And now you're jumping into this whole saga that, like Jake said, spanned years of, so many issues of comic books, and they're just rushing together to make this character arc that is, half-baked and half-finished and just just a mess.
Oh my goodness. If we're talking about stuffing overcomplicated comic book plots into a movie, oh, my blood's boiling. I'm just thinking about BVS and how much I'm gonna. Oh, I don't want to do it.
We got some time till then.
Let's slow it down.
But
Don't.
that's in the future. That's in the future.
Yeah, we're still a ways away. Just to move the movie forward a little bit, since we already talked about some of it, but basically, Angel's dad, Warren Worthington II, has developed this quote-unquote cure for the X gene. It suppresses the X gene using the DNA of a mutant named Jimmy or Leech, who they keep in this one room in their facility, kind of semi against his will. I'd say in a way of it's not like they're physically forcing him to be there, but he's like a young child, so it's not exactly he can consent very informed to medical experimentation. And the cure interests some mutants like Rogue, who have powers that are more intrusive in their lives, while others are very wary of it and its potential for weaponization. Meanwhile, Magneto's reestablishing the Brotherhood with the purpose of shutting down the cure, warning that it's going to be weaponized as a way to commit mutant genocide. With the help of Pyro, Callisto, Psylocke, and several other mutants, Magneto attacks a mobile prison and frees Mystique, Multiple Man, and Juggernaut. Mystique then shields Magneto from a cure dart and loses her mutant abilities, with Magneto abandoning her there. I mean, I guess we kind of already covered what we think about Angel and the cure elements, but I also want to say, well, I do generally like some portions of the additional cast. The big exception being Juggernaut sucks in this movie and is very disappointing, and it's a bad costume as well. This is another element to me of this movie. It feels like it's three movies in one. You have one movie about the Brotherhood reuniting, you have one movie about the Cure, and you have one movie about the Phoenix, and it's a sub 2-hour movie, and these three plots never fully coalesce.
And none of them are good.
And all of them are half-baked.
None of them are fully, just make one of them and make one of them good. What's the Ron Swanson quote? Never half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing. That's what they should have fucking done with this movie. It's just, they had 3 movies that they wanted to make, and instead of making 3 movies, they made 3 of them in one. Like, it almost feels like they had 3 scripts and they like dropped all of them and the pages all got mixed into each other.
Do you know what happened, Jason? What happened was there was one time in which there were some script writers that were each given a task to write a script for an upcoming X-Men film. And then when each of them were walking down a crossway hallway, they each ran into each other, and all the papers, all the scripts flew into the air and mixed together. And because Rat Bastard was such an asshole, he just put it together because they couldn't do anything else. I hate that bastard. That went nowhere. Let's beat him up.
I mean, the other thing I wanted to mention, just because I don't even know fully how I feel about it, is Magneto abandoning Mystique after she gets hit with the Cure Dart.
That is such
go back and forth on if that's like making him too shitty, or if it like, because he is pretty like anti-human, like, you know, he is pretty like, we're the next step, he means the humans are gonna go extinct type of thing, but she just like took a bullet for you, dude. And I just don't know if that's, I can't decide how I feel about that for his character.
It also thematically, to me, doesn't make sense, because like the whole big thing that's about that part of the story is that like mutants don't need a cure because it's not a disease and it's not something that needs a cure. But the fact that she gets shot, to him, makes her no longer a mutant. But the whole theme about, like, you know, the X-Men being that they represent minority groups, it kind of comes across as weird that he would morally be like, nah, you're not a mutant anymore, when, like, she still has the gene. It's still there. By technicality, it's just been suppressed. She's still a mutant.
But he doesn't spend enough time mourning it.
Yeah, and he just kind of goes like...
Is, like, it's not like he left her there, but he seemed upset at, like, the loss of, like, another mutant and whatever. Like, he was also kind of cold about it, and it was just kind of fucked.
He also actively says that she's not a mutant anymore and then leaves.
Yeah, it's just kind of, it almost just feels like it doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't read to the morals of what the X-Men feel like they're supposed to represent. Like, I feel like his whole thing is like just riding, like, for each other and, you know, and being there for mutants. And it's like the second she, through no fault of her own, is like her mutation is suppressed, he's like, bitch.
I was gonna say, it's not even like what I feel in character would be something to do is to be like, take her in and find, like, in essence, a cure to a cure. God, I hate that so much.
Yeah, wait,
but like,
the first movie was about him creating mutants.
Yeah, so it's like, why would you not want to? In essence, she's not something that needs to be fixed, but in this case, it's something where they're like suppressing who she is. So in that sense, it's something that needs to be fixed. I guess.
Yeah, that's true. It's a suppression. It's not like that, like extracting. And I mean, granted, at the time, like, so you also eventually find out at the end of the movie that the cure actually doesn't fully work. Is what they start to like tease. And granted, Magneto doesn't know this at the time. Nobody knows this, and I could also even buy that he may not have like a full grasp on exactly how it works. Though he does seem to know it's coming from this other mutant's DNA that they're holding. But it feels like Magneto ends up getting hit with the cure himself at the end of the movie, and I feel like the way if he was so cold about what happened to Mystique, to me, that same character would then, when getting hit by his own cure, would probably kill himself. Like, I don't see a Magneto that turns his back on someone who's done so much for him and meant so much for him as Mystique that coldly when she gets shot with the cure, then just kind of like going about the end of his life. Like, I just don't feel like that's, like, you kind of have to like do something, like those two things, like him not, like, it doesn't line up, you know?
Yeah, it's just out of character. It just doesn't make sense. It's poor writing, really.
Back to the Phoenix side of things, Scott Summers, he's still distraught over the loss of Jean and drives to her resting location at Alkali Lake, where she had died in the previous movie. Jean appears to Scott, and as the two kiss, Jean kills him. Sensing trouble, Xavier, Logan, and Storm go to investigate, and when they arrive, they only find telekinetically floating rocks, Scott's glasses, and an unconscious Jean. At the X Mansion, Xavier explains that when Jean sacrificed herself to save them, she also freed the Phoenix, a dark alternate personality with godlike destructive potential, which Xavier had telepathically repressed. Logan is disgusted to learn of this psychic tampering with Jean's mind, but once she awakens and tries to seduce him, he discovers that she's killed Scott and is no longer the Jean he once knew. The Phoenix emerges, knocks out Logan, escapes to her childhood home. Learning of Jean's resurrection, Magneto and the Brotherhood arrive at the Grey home at the same time as the X-Men. Magneto and Xavier go in, mirroring the opening scene of the movie, and both vie for Jean's loyalty, this time pulling her into opposite directions until the Phoenix resurfaces. She destroys the house and disintegrates Xavier, and then leaves with Magneto. So we already talked about the disappointment in the death of Cyclops. So y'all can say more if you have it, but I don't want to beat a dead horse on that. I do want to like sort of give this movie credit for being the first one to show like Professor X is like a shithead. And even like you go into the comics like past the original like Stan Lee kind of run, like he's a real shitbag who does a lot of really unethical stuff with his telepathy, such as repressing things like this. So I guess I'll give it something there for illustrating that part of him pretty effectively. That said, I really hate that they took the Phoenix, something that is traditionally a cosmic force of nature symbolizing death and rebirth, and are just like, it's a different personality. It's just so lame.
Yeah, it feels like they really couldn't do much with the Phoenix. I feel like it's partially a situation of like they really didn't want to, like, in the way of like in the comics obviously it's like a cosmic force, and in this it feels like they really didn't want to go that far. Like they didn't want to go the distance that a comic would usually go, like we've seen in the past where they're like, oh, that one's a bit too weird to bring up. And it just feels in the end really it just really feels undercooked, and like they really didn't think about how they were gonna go through with this, and it just comes out like this. It's like eating a raw chicken. I didn't want this. I didn't want this.
I was about to say.
This movie gives you salmonella.
Undercooked. This shit's salmonella. Yeah, this shit's fucking raw, Sean. It's not even cooked. You basically just put it slaughtered the chicken, dissected it, cleaned out all the feathers, cleaned the meat, and then just ate it without even fucking putting on the pan. So all that worked for nothing. You might as well have taken a bite of the live chicken.
It has the vibe of like the Lethal Weapon movies that they make in Always Sunny, of just like they don't know what they're doing. They're just kind of going as they go.
Yeah. And the thing is, and what's so bad about this movie is that... No, the thing was in the last movie we talked about. Dark Phoenix... The thing is the Dark Phoenix is supposed to be this cosmic entity, right? That is the harbinger of death. That is this almighty godlike figure. And then they just made it like a Jekyll and Hyde thing with Jean. And it's just so infuriating.
Yeah, maybe if they had like developed the plot throughout the past two movies and like had character arcs and shit, like maybe they would have, been able to be in a position to tell the story.
I think what you're saying there is key, Jason, because I think their decision to make it just an alternate personality is a combination of like Hollywood was still very afraid of doing the like cosmic goofy out there stuff at this point in their comic book adaptations, which honestly in my opinion, like giant space firebird that possesses people isn't even that out there compared to like fucking Wizard of Oz. But like so I think it was a combination of that and also like how do we introduce random space bird lore in this movie when there's already so much going on, which first of all, maybe either then just don't do the Phoenix at all or scrap some of the other things. But two, even if you want to say like, okay, we think it's too out there to do this, we're going to make it an alternate personality, then develop that in the previous... You can still develop that in the previous two films, even if you're not developing the weird space lore. Like... But there's nothing here, really. There's like a one little hint at the end of X2 that the Phoenix is coming, but with like no context. And as a result, it's not just a bad decision, I think, in switching it, but it's also a poorly executed switch because it's not like this is developed well.
No, nothing's really developed well. Everything's half-baked. Everything's undercooked. Everything's raw. I got all kinds of diseases in my stomach now, thanks to this fucking movie.
How do y'all feel about Xavier's death scene?
Kind of dumb, but that goes for most of this
Kinda
movie.
dumb.
So
I mean, like, it wasn't great.
I agree with the idea that it was like, I like that they show that Xavier's like capable of doing some terrible shit. And he isn't all good, just in the same way that like Magneto is, but like it just feels stupid to kill him.
Yeah, and it just got to a point that I just didn't care anymore. Like, the movie was so underdeveloped that, like, that happened and I was like, wow, I wish I could have brought myself to care about that.
It felt like this is obviously going back to like Cyclops dying, but it's like, well, I do feel like I see a lot of Professor Xavier I wanted to see more, and this film really doesn't leave it open of him potentially like returning in a way, like physically anyways, but it just like in the same way that like Cyclops dies, where you don't it doesn't feel like it's, like we've all said, it doesn't feel like it's developed. With like Cyclops, I really want to see him be a leader, and I want to see him lead the X-Men. I want to see him do X-Men stuff, and then he dies and I have no idea that he's never coming back. It's the same
he never does.
It's the same
until, you know, that movie by that guy.
It's the same with Charles, where it's like, obviously I get a lot more of Charles and a lot more of him is developed, but it's like I really just want more. And like killing off so many major characters to the X-Men in this movie, while it all feels so underdeveloped, makes all of it feel really unearned, unemotionally like charged, and it takes away so much because it doesn't make me want to like continue to watch.
Yeah.
Bodies for the sake of bodies. Like, they
Yeah.
kill Scott and Charles and Jean a second time, and then they cure Magneto and Mystique and Rogue. And, like, I get you want to have some stakes, and this is, like, the trilogy capper, but it kind of, like, crossed the point into, like, okay, what are we doing? Now you're just, like, drawing names out of a hat for, like, who loses their powers and who dies. It's not... I do like Charles's last, don't let it control you line. Like, I mean, I guess that was nice that he had some kind of peace there. I don't know, but y'all covered it already. It just feels excessive.
Yeah, the other thing, it's just, I don't know, man. It all feels so brand new, and then they're dying, because it's like, it's so underdeveloped. Even though the first two movies are pretty good, it's like the characters that are dying are so underdeveloped. So it doesn't matter to me. I don't know, it just sucks.
Yeah. It's awful. It's so bad. I hate it so much. And that's all I'm gonna say.
So the movie progresses with Jean going with Magneto, and then meanwhile the FBI are interrogating the depowered Mystique, and through that discover that Magneto's base is in the woods and raid it. Which said that they have this whole line about like how she gives up Magneto because, you know, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and that just, the eyes fell out of my fucking skull at how just goddamn reductive that line was for Mystique and just women. But like, also, we talk about character writing. There is nothing that we've ever been shown about Mystique who's so like will do anything for the cause that would lead me to believe that just because Magneto left her behind on that truck, that she would then sell out the entire Brotherhood, and that she would completely abandon mutant freedom. That none of that sat right with me.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as character consistency in this movie.
Anytime you think you get a feel for someone's like character and you feel like they're actually starting to develop, they do something just completely out of character from what you thought their character was.
Or die.
Yeah,
die.
that too. Or they just fucking die. Like Scott. Like, you think maybe this is the part where they develop Cyclops because he's like grieving and this is an emotional conflict within himself. Nope, he dies.
That's the
That's what
thing, is
happens.
that
He
so many
dies.
characters with the highest potential in a narrative sense die.
Or just aren't used.
It keeps happening. They double down, I think, on Magneto with like him using Jean as a weapon right after she just murdered Charles, someone he cared deeply for, and right after abandoning Mystique, who had just saved him. It really like I feel like it's trying to maybe paint a picture that he lost his way, but we never really saw who he was in context like opposed to that, which I think we've talked about in other episodes, where you get to the point of like him becoming randomly cartoonishly evil, so you don't start to realize that he's right. And as a result, he just kind of feels like despicable rather than someone who lost sight of like why and who he was going to war for. And it really doubles down because he has the line of like somebody, I can't remember who it was, but somebody starts to, I think Pyro
It
says
was
like,
Pyro,
"Oh, I
yeah.
would have
I was
killed
just
him
about to bring that up.
if Jean did it." And he says Charles Xavier did more for mutants than you'll ever know. My single greatest regret is that he had to die for his dream to live, which is wonderful, and I love him snapping at Pyro about that. And that's like probably the best, I think, like most consistent look of what Magneto is from what we've seen before. But then at the same time, he just sometimes he's so cold and callous, and sometimes you get these like little, and I think some of that's Ian McKellen being fucking great coming through, but it's just so weird that they
Yeah,
can't.
and I was gonna bring that scene up too of Pyro saying that because it's like you have that moment where it's like, okay, well that was like really heartfelt from him, so maybe he didn't lose his way, and maybe he's not completely like past the point of no return. But then everything else he does is completely callous, and he doesn't seem to care that his close friend, who he has been through so much with, is dead. Like it, I don't know. Like it seems like he doesn't give a shit for some of it, and it's like, am I supposed to feel like he's completely lost it? Or but then he does that, and it's like, oh well, he still clearly cares because that was very compassionate. So it just the messaging is just completely lost.
I just and so it also like speaking of the dead friend, the whole team and school just kind of like forgets the scene later that he caused all this by repressing Jean's personality rather than like taking her to fucking therapy. It's just like I gave them credit for like putting that into Xavier's character, and I'll keep that credit there. But then the movie just kind of drops it after Charles dies, and they just forget about his sins. And I know you could be saying like, well, maybe you want to say something about revolutionaries that have done bad things, but you know you look at them after their death, and you look at all the good they did. The movie's not. You're giving this movie way too much credit in that case because there's nothing about this movie that's saying that. It just never brings it up again.
Yeah, they make a lot of like statements that like all of the statements that this movie's trying to make is like they're all like dependent clauses that don't have an independent clause attached to them or anything else. You know, like if they were sentences, that's what they'd be. Like they're just not full sentences. Like it just everything that starts to get developed, they just kind of drop it. Maybe they come back to it, but they definitely don't fucking finish it. Like, don't get it twisted. They will not finish a plot point in this movie. Like, don't expect it to happen.
No, they'll kill all the characters
They'll
before
kill
they
everyone.
finish a plot
They'll
point.
kill everyone before they make any kind of statement or theme or plot development, anything.
Yeah, this whole movie is just a hostage situation gone wrong.
Okay, I'm gonna push. I'm like holding myself back at this point from talking about the ethics of this movie now and this movie's morals, but I want to like get through this next chunk first to really be able to explain it. So the FBI tries to raid his base, but finds out it's just multiple men and his copies. So Magneto and the Brotherhood attack Alcatraz with the intention of killing the young mutant named Jimmy, aka Leech, whose genome is used to create the cure. Which is again another example of like Magneto trying to kill a mutant child is so the antithesis of what I think we've seen a lot from him before, but the movie doesn't do anything to dwell on that. It just kind of feels like it's not like it feels like they gave Bastard and Kinberg and Zach Penn. Like I feel like the creatives in this movie got like a bullet point plot summary of the last two X-Men movies, but did not actually ever see them because there's just no consistency, whether it be in character writing or in just little things like this wouldn't necessarily be the biggest deal if there wasn't other things wrong with it, but I think it's another sign of what we talked about. Magneto gets surprised when the military has plastic guns as if they haven't had him in a plastic prison for extended amount of time in previous movies, and this isn't even the first time he's faced plastic weaponry he happened in the previous movies.
Do you know what he should be surprised about though? He should be surprised that it took them this long to fight him with plastic guns.
You should be surprised that this movie fucking came out.
But it's not the first time, and so he puts the Brotherhood on the Golden Gate Bridge and flies the Golden Gate Bridge over to Alcatraz, which like does admittedly look fucking awesome. Really cool moment to try to kill this child. So they show up, they're gonna overwhelm the military troops until the remaining X-Men arrive to confront him. During the fight, Kitty Pryde saves Jimmy from Juggernaut. Logan distracts Magneto for Hank McCoy to inject him with the cure, nullifying his powers. The Phoenix awakens and begins destroying anyone within range of her powers. Logan realizes the only way to stop the Phoenix is him due to his healing factor and an adamantium skeleton. So Logan approaches Jean. Jean momentarily gains control and begs for Logan to kill her. Logan fatally stabs Jean, killing the Phoenix and Jean, and mourns her death. So I do think the action isn't bad in the climax. I think there's some good action in there. Particularly Iceman kind of sunning Pyro and just making him his bitch is kind of satisfying, actually. And I'll leave room for y'all to talk about anything that you want to talk about now, because I'm gonna have a lot to say when I start talking about what this movie seems to be saying about the ethics of the X-Men protecting the military that is enforcing a weaponized cure, which is a wild phrase.
I'm surprised you think this movie has anything to say, because anything it could say. Oh, really? Because I don't think this movie says anything. I think this movie is just, it's not creatively bankrupt. It's just, it just fumbles the bag so bad. Like in the end, because how do I even explain this? Basically, what I'm trying to get at is it was building these things up from the beginning, and then they have all these different plot points, and then when they try to tie together everything at the end, in the end, they just got like a pirate's knot, like the one knot that looks like a ball of yarn, the one that looks untangleable, right? Undoable. That's basically what they got at the end, because they did a horrible job of tying everything together that it just became such a hobbled mess that they just said fuck it and just decided to try to salvage it by filming what they consider cool scenes, which were okay, but it's just, when you're outdone by movies in your own in your own category, like not just other superhero movies of the time, but like the previous X-Men movies, the execution of those movies are so much better. The finality of them are so much better. It's just sad, especially when this is supposed to be, you know, the finale, the ending of the X-Men trilogy. It's just really sad. And then after that scene that Jake is going to talk about, they just conveniently tie up the Dark Phoenix arc, which in retrospect had nothing to do with the movie in general. It was just there for the sake of being there. It didn't need to be there in the first place. It was just a waste of time and a waste of my eye energy staring at it. That's it.
If anything, I give this, I'm not going to get into the other parts of this ending, but like I give the movie props for having some fairly decent action, and some fairly decent, you know, scenes when taken out of context entirely. But like like Matt said, it fumbles the bag a lot. And then like, you know, one of the things I noticed we never talked about was the script writing was terrible.
Oh,
the dialogue is awful.
It was horrendous.
Charles always wanted to build bridges line. I could almost puked.
God, that was
Oh my
awful. I mean,
God,
like everybody always points at the "I'm the Juggernaut" bitch, but like
oh my God, it was
there are so many
horrendous.
terrible lines in this
It
movie.
was literally, you know what my fucking thought was in the middle of watching this? I genuinely thought to myself, this movie is a fucking insult to storytelling, like and writing in general. Like it's just the plot, the script, like the dialogue, everything is just it's not good.
It's amazing.
It's
Is what it is.
It's not good. It's truly and unbelievably incredible. No, but like it's just bad. Like all of it, everything about it is bad. It's and like like Sean was saying, like it did have some pretty decent action and all that. Like, but nothing good about this movie was like that good to the point that I like.
It doesn't make up
Like
for it.
exactly like I don't walk away from it thinking like, oh, this like the movie wasn't that good, but this scene was pretty good. I walk away from it thinking like, what a fucking pile of dog shit. What a vapid excuse for art. Like what a piece of shit movie this was. Like that's how I felt walking away from it. I didn't have any redeeming qualities, even though I can like look back at it and see them. I didn't have them coming away from this movie.
All right. Y'all mind if I get on my soapbox?
Do it.
Cause
Do it.
okay. So
Do
the
it.
Just
moment
go
that
do it
this
so I can fall asleep finally.
fuck you. The moment that it clicked for me, because I hadn't watched this movie in a few years, and I never enjoyed it. But the moment that I think it like clicked for me that how like genuinely kind of evil this movie is, and I know it sounds dramatic, but is when Pyro is outside a mutant cure facility during a protest. There's kind of a protest for both the cure and for mutant rights going on, and Pyro firebombs the cure facility, and they act like it is this horrific act of terror. That is an act of self-defense. The first act of violence is the United States military and government creating a cure as well as subsequently weaponizing it. The second that is done, they have declared we're going to commit genocide. And this movie seems to want to act like it seems to want to there's bad people on both sides thing. These people are actively committing a genocide in the building that Pyro shoots fire into. Why should I feel any conflict in him doing that? That is an ethically right thing to do in my opinion. And the movie continues to act as if the Brotherhood aren't acting in self-defense when they go to the place, a literal prison. They go to essentially what's going to be a concentration camp for mutants, where they are mass manufacturing a mutant cure, and then the X-Men show up and defend the military that are protecting the cure. And they want me to side with that. This movie seems to think that it is like okay that we should like that you can just be like, no, that's bad. And I'm not a very violent person. I'm a little soft boy. I'm not sitting here like trying to overtalk like what I bring to the table, I guess, in that regard. But you're talking about like I don't see how you could debate that this is not self-defense on behalf of any mutants attacking cure facilities. I just don't. And then it doubles down to the point of the X-Men using the cure in Magneto, which feels so wrong for that to happen. And is so because you're already talking about like the movie does seem to be aware of the fact that it's fucked that these anti-mutant people are using a mutant to quote unquote cure other mutants, but then the X-Men cure a mutant, and then the movie continues on, and you see Rogue voluntarily receives the cure. And I know you can say, "Oh, voluntarily, whatever," but I just don't understand how you can see a situation of like that is tantamount to someone who like convinces themselves they're not gay, like who like pray the gay, and then being like, "Oh yeah, that's okay because they chose to like." how anything other than just like horrifying it is that after everything that happens in this movie, the cure is still being made and distributed. And I know the fact that the movie is showing that it's still happening is not, depiction doesn't equal endorsement, and it doesn't necessarily inherently mean that the movie sides with the cure. But there's nothing about the movie other than like Bobby being sort of sad that Rogue took the cure seems to indicate that like this is fucked up, because you could be making a powerful statement about the fact that all of this happened and yet these bad things are still pushing forward, and that could be really impactful. But like, and I'm open to listen if someone hears this and is like, well, the movie does this to show that, but I don't see anything in the movie that tells me that it thinks it's horrifying as it is that the cure still exists, because this movie to me feels like it turns, the comic books are probably the most, or in my opinion are maybe the most inherently political medium. They come from political cartoons, and putting aside like personal opinions, the X-Men specifically are probably the most like overtly leftist creation of like Marvel DC, like not counting indie creator own stuff. And they basically take them and turn them into like American Democrats who sit there and like mouthpiece progressive ideas while actually just enforcing the status quo but with a pride pin on. And I don't know how this movie, like I walked away from this movie feeling like kind of disgusted. It's not by any means like the worst movie I've watched so far for this podcast. Actually kept me like relatively entertained throughout, and like Sean said, there's some good action, but it just felt so like I walked away feeling like dirty. Like I just like watched a movie that was like, with everything that's happening with like queer people these days, especially, or just like people of color. I just walked away being like, this movie seems to take the side of you should sit there and take it, and not you should defend yourself.
I think that it's also important to note that, like, you mentioned Rogue voluntarily taking it. Now, like, the term voluntarily, like, yes, they're choosing to take the cure, and the metaphor in real life of the easy metaphor of, like, shock therapy, of trying to make people straight, I suppose. And it's like, yeah, well, they are doing it voluntarily, but they're doing it voluntarily under the guise that the world has told them that it's wrong for them to be the way they are. So it's really not voluntary. It can't be voluntary because they're doing it under a pretense that they're wrong for being who they are. So I think that they don't show that, and it shows it, like, they show Bobby being upset with Rogue doing it, but they show it as like two sides that can coexist, when I feel like what they're doing is not something that can coexist because it's violent towards a group of people and is inherently putting them down and telling them that they're worse.
That's very true. Thank you for
This is a good
correcting that
example of
terminology, because it's definitely not voluntary when you're emotionally coerced.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, even if it's not like Rogue wasn't specifically coerced by anyone, but she had a feeling about herself that she was lesser than, or that she couldn't live a normal life being herself because of how society looked at her.
I feel that, and I mean, I feel that in a certain way too, of like, I think with myself being asexual, with Rogue's big issue being like I can't come in physical contact with the person I love. Like obviously I literally can, like I'm not gonna fucking kill them like she would. But there is that just inherent pressure, even if no one like physically says it, of like the idea that that is necessary for self-fulfillment. And then like if she's never learns that you don't need that, and obviously it's not one to one, she is not literally asexual, but just like for myself seeing that of like, for a while there was I had the idea of, well, if I could stop being that I would, because it's like something's missing and not just something's different. And I think like you look at Rogue's character, and she sees this opportunity to stop being what she is, because nothing about, even if it's passive, nothing about society has ever society sounds so stupid to say, but like has ever taught her that it's okay that she has to like do things differently and like how to live with that. And it's such a betrayal, I think, of we've talked in the previous X-Men movies of adapting that Rogue character as well, who so boldly embraces who she is in most other versions of the character, and to just kind of do away with that and then to do so without even saying how I think effectively how sad that is. It sucks.
Yeah, and another thing is like I think that's something that's so disappointing about the way they frame it is that the X-Men are used to represent marginalized groups, and when you look at the history of marginalized groups, particularly like we're all from America, so I can speak to that history better, but like when you look at how marginalized groups came to be seen as civil and equal, at least in the eyes of the law, like a lot of the protests came from like there had to be violence because there was violence towards them and they had to act in response to that and be violent. And sometimes that's necessary in protest, and that's why it's protest. And I feel like they don't it makes it feel like the way they frame it in the movie makes it feel like the the violent protest is wrong even though there's violence being inflicted towards them, and there's nothing wrong with the cure and it can coexist with the mutants also existing, when in reality I think that's completely backward. I think that the cure existing is violence towards mutants, and that existing is just progressing the marginalization. And I think the movie does a terrible job of portraying a group that's supposed to stand for equality in that sense.
It's the paradox of tolerance. I saw the name Karl Popper attached. The idea that like a tolerant society should also tolerate intolerance, and the lack of distinction between the difference of the decision to hate another group of people based off of something that they just are versus not and not tolerating that. So like you said, like it there's a big gap between like someone you get anti again, like I think for this example it comes in really clearly with LGBTQ stuff, that people who are like, oh well, I just want them to respect my lifestyle of not liking it, and it's like, well, they just are like exist, these aren't things that are comparable, and hate is not, even if it's taught and learned and is somewhat ingrained, it's still a choice. It's not something that's like part of you, and it just it's really in the end, if you tolerate intolerance, it ends up being those marginalized groups that get kicked out. Like it's asinine.
It's crazy. I don't know. Yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Unlimited tolerance can lead to the extinction of tolerance.
Yeah, I think the movie just has very mixed messaging and doesn't.
It's
I thought you were
just
just gonna say, yeah, this movie sucks.
No, I think it's like, well, it does suck, and that's part of what makes it suck is that like the X-Men have a clear message, and I feel like they just didn't use that message, and they kind of went against it, and kind of went against even the messages they were sending in the first two movies and what built to this, and it just kind of goes back on all that, I feel.
Yeah, I just
Yep.
I mean they stopped Jean, I guess that was fine. Man, that took a lot
But
out of
that's
me.
what I mean, like the only way in which this movie concludes is that like, yeah, there's a protagonist and an antagonist, and the protagonist defeats the antagonist. But
Mhm.
like in terms of like the themes and character arcs, like absolutely nothing is concluded.
The movie like fully wraps up with some kind of mutant rights are obtained, but again the cure still exists, so I don't really think that functions. They say that like a law passed, but also you're yeah, I'm done talking about that. Xavier's school is still operating. Storm's now the headmistress. The president of the United States appoints McCoy, Beast, as ambassador to United Nations. Rogue has taken the cure and now rekindles her relationship with Iceman, which for me now it's like you're spitting this. Well, that's what Rogue wanted, so this is happy and fine. Meanwhile, Magneto sits at a chessboard in a park in San Francisco, seemingly human and weak, but as he gestures towards a metal piece, it wobbles slightly. Elsewhere, a nurse checking on a comatose patient is startled when he greets her with Charles Xavier's voice. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't know what I have to say. It's disappointing. It's unfulfilling as a trilogy conclusion. I don't want to get into future installments, but I'm glad this ended up not being the last thing we saw of these characters. I guess the
Mhm.
teases were kind of potentially promising, even if Charles stealing somebody's body is a little fucked. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like
Not that this movie knows what's a good thing to do and what's the wrong thing to do anyway. That's it.
it's
You guys say what you have to say.
it's kind of hard for me to like judge the conclusion of the film, like the scene that is the conclusion, I should say, because it doesn't conclude anything. And like I said just a minute ago before Jake finished up that synopsis, like it doesn't conclude any character development or anything, so it's tough for me to really gauge how good of a conclusion this is, because it doesn't. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't get enough out of like the plot wrap up for this to even be good or bad to me.
This movie bad.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
That's kind of what I'm getting at there.
This is just a perfect example of how the movie just gets worse the more you think about it. I completely forgot about Rogue's decision to quote unquote cure herself at the end. I remember for a brief moment after that scene happened, I was so upset. And then because this movie is this movie, I forgot about it.
Well, yeah, you kind of purge it out of your memory because it's so bad. And then,
Mhm.
like, you start talking
Exactly.
about it and you're like, oh shit, this was really
Yeah.
bad.
It's basically like you just forget about it, but then when you do think about it, you're all of a sudden filled with hatred.
Yeah, for sure.
That's basically what this movie is. Like the fact that she went through
What,
with
a
it at
pile
the
of dog
end
shit?
for some boy is honestly really gross.
It's a pile of dog
The
shit.
fact that it's a pile of dog shit. That's the thing though. I don't even believe that they did this on purpose. I just believe that they just didn't want her to fight because she has very powerful powers, and so they just wanted to take her.
I don't think,
Like,
I don't think they know.
Like the thing is like Jake has very valid points, and I don't think this is what they meant, which is
Well,
10
that's the
times more
thing, is,
insulting.
like,
that they didn't even bother like
I don't think they know
analyzing
what
their
they
decisions
wanted.
of the exactly. That's what I'm thinking. It's like they weren't even thinking about like the implications they are dropping, but with the decisions they made in the movie, they just did it for the sake of plot convenience.
Right, and which still doesn't excuse it.
No, it doesn't
It's still
excuse it.
bad and still
Exactly.
poor
It just-
filmmaking
no,
and lazy.
It's not just bad. It makes it worse.
Yeah,
Because
well,
it
yeah,
just
yeah.
seems how so arrogant they are. No, not arrogant. Ignorant. Ignorant's the right word.
Yeah, and it's not good.
No.
It's not good. It bad.
No, but yeah, I agree with you. Like it feels like they had no idea what they wanted to do with this movie, and they, sometimes when you don't know what you want to do, you figure it out along the way and you make something decent. They didn't.
Nope.
They didn't do that.
Oh,
They
Yeah.
did not figure it out along the way, and they made something really bad, actually. Notably bad.
I was just gonna say, what was that saying? It's like something about cake and then wanting to eat it too, or something like that.
They want to
What
have
was
their
the
cake
saying
and eat it
called?
too, which doesn't make much sense as an expression because who doesn't want to eat the cake they have? But go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, like they wanted to have their own thing, but still tie in Dark Phoenix elements to it. I don't know, to give it more of like a finality to it, and that it's a more well-known comic book plot line. But man, it's just like they fumbled the bag really bad. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that movie's bad, and that's it.
Yeah, it's bad. I think for me, like the highlights probably the couple of Angel scenes. They're like well done scenes. The shots of him flying out of the building are like relatively powerful. It's also the only time I think the movie seems to have any kind of awareness of its moral compass because my least favorite thing is just I'm having a hard time thinking of another movie that I walked away from feeling this like kind of gross because like I mean again I have no problem with I've seen plenty of movies that have like way more fucked up shit in them or whatever like woohoo, but they have like an artistic angle on what they're saying about these things, and sometimes it's even an angle that I don't necessarily agree with, but I appreciate and understand what they're saying. And this is just something that like I think it's equally possible that what Matt said is true, that they just were so incompetent. Given
Yeah,
the person who the rat bastard, as Matt's been calling him, that is one of the main driving forces creatively of this movie. I think it's equally possible that his lack of talent is showing here, and that his lack of common decency is showing here.
I am not going to disprove that, because I think that is very possible that he totally meant
All
for
of
these
these
messages to
things
come
are equally possible, and it's also equally possible that it's some mix of
Yeah.
these things, you know?
I just think he's too dumb
But all we
to put
know
these things in.
is that this
I
is a
don't think
piece
it
of shit.
matters. Because I think
Yeah,
like,
that. Oh yeah, it
if,
doesn't. In the end, it doesn't
if
matter.
you're being harmful out of ignorance, you're still being harmful, and maybe it's something you can correct. But like, my point is like, I mean, death of the author and all that or whatever, in terms of what's being received versus what was intended. But I think for my money, that is the message. What I've already talked about is the message this movie gives off. So that's how I interpret it. And I'm not
Mhm.
sitting here trying to say that like I think the idea that all interpretations are like necessarily equally valid is bullshit, because you have to be able to back it up. But I feel like I have at length what I've already talked about, so I don't want to bore you anymore. This movie, whether it was all the various people involved intention or not, has a is morally bankrupt. It has no real compass in terms of what is right and what is wrong, and in my opinion, does seem to say intentionally certain things, like the firebombing at the Cure facility is bad, or to me, like the idea, like the X-Men preventing the destruction of another Cure facility. That's like such another level of stupid. If you're not realizing that that the leads of the movie doing that is co-signing that as the right thing to do when you're making a superhero movie, but anyway, that's my least favorite point. I can't think of another movie where I walked around feeling as gross from. I don't recommend it. I think if you're watching through the X-Men films for the first time ever, it may be kind of a plot necessity to watch once, and like I said, it keeps you kind of like entertained, and it's not till you like look back at it that you're really disgusted at its quality. But if you can, if you even if you're in that scenario, if you feel okay getting by reading a plot summary, do that instead. But if you're like me and would be bothered by that, sure. But no, I don't recommend it. I don't know why I'm making this long-winded, but I don't.
Yeah, my favorite thing, I guess, I don't know, I liked Pyro because, like, fire's cool, and he kind of had, like, some, like, punk rock values. Like, he wasn't, like, afraid to, like, you know, go in there and you fight for himself, you know what I'm saying? You lit that bitch up. It's tough to pick a least favorite part. I guess just the disrespect to my boy Jimmy Marsden. Shout out. He deserved better than that. And yeah, there's no reason you should watch this movie. There's no.
Honestly, I don't even want to say my favorite scene, because
Why
the
bother?
entertainment value, exactly, the entertainment value I've gathered from this movie is far outweighed, far outweighed by the just the audacity of this movie, and I mean audacity in like the worst way possible. It's so lazy in the worst ways.
I will say, like, I was kind of thinking, like, damn, it's gonna be tough to pick my favorite thing because it was all pretty bad. And then I was like, damn, it's gonna be tough to pick my least favorite thing because it was all pretty bad. So to your point, that was a thought in my head.
Mm-hmm. Yup. Well, my least favorite thing is the ending, because it's dumb. It doesn't tie anything together. It has such horrible implications and undertones. Oh my god. Oh, I don't want to think about it anymore. I'm going to go on a Jake rant if I think about it more.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't recommend this movie.
It is
obviously.
kind of crazy how, like, the conclusion of this movie just doesn't conclude.
Yeah, it doesn't conclude, and instead they're open to basically protecting the one thing that threatens their existence.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh my god. It's so funny by how stupid
I
it
swear
is.
we could make a movie, guys. Like, come on. This shit came out. We could make a fucking movie. And I don't want to hold off Sean's final thoughts too much
No.
longer, but I do want to.
Oh yeah, sorry.
But I
Sean.
will say a final note on that topic is, you know, I'm glad things like this exist because it just gives me more confidence in myself. Because if someone made this, like someone exists that is this bad at their job, I'm doing all right.
I will give my final thoughts. This movie sucks.
Bravo, Sean.
Beautifully put.
I'm trying to think.
Bravo.
I'm really trying to think. What is my favorite thing? It's hard. It's actually hard. This one's a hard one because, like, look, there's some scenes in here when taken out of context, they're good, but when you put it into context, oh my god, it's dog shit.
Yeah. It's like
That's my
the
favorite.
one thing about this movie is the action, but then you think about what they were fighting against.
It's like I think about the action and it's like it's good, but it's nothing amazing. And then I also think about the context and I'm like, oh my god, it's garbage. Never mind, I take that back. So it's like it's really hard because this is one of the few times where it's like the central, I guess, issues just plague everything, and it just makes everything feel worse than it should. And this is like the first time where I just can't separate parts of a movie and say like, yeah, this part's good, and this is what I like about it. But like that's why like I think my favorite thing is just gonna be like if you take some scenes out of context, there can be some really good scenes. Like the beginning with Angel, great. The idea of Magneto moving a whole bridge, great. Cut that line out and it'll be great. So like it's like, god damn it, the worst thing about this movie, it exists. It really shouldn't have. I really wish they had stuck to just one storyline in this thing instead of doing 3 different things at once. God, that was such an awful choice.
I wish they had made, like one fucking movie.
I wish they had made a movie that was, not that was worth watching. But like, yeah, I don't recommend this movie. It's such a good thing when you can say don't watch this movie and you watching this movie won't affect you at all, because I don't know if I've seen this movie before now. And my god, it never affected me. I was able to watch the X-Men movies afterwards. I watched the first 2 beforehand, like I had seen them before, if I remember correctly. And like this is the one that I hadn't seen because I knew it was bad. I knew how bad it was, so I avoided it as a kid because it came out at a time when I like understood that movies can be bad, and so I never watched it.
I'm so sorry.
And so like it makes me feel so much better knowing that I never saw this, and having now seen it, knowing that I didn't need to watch it anyways. You don't have to watch it. Avoid it. Avoid it entirely. It's the plague. Just go away from it.
And Jake, I'm not mad we skipped it because honestly, I just wanted to get over talking about this goddamn movie because it's inevitable. Like I've already it's like complaining about being shot. I already been shot. What the fuck's the point? Like
That's so funny.
what the fuck I'm going to complain about it?
Shit already happened. What are we gonna do?
Exactly. Might as well get over
Let's
with.
talk about the here and the now.
So thanks to ALO VFX for the podcast artwork. Thank you to Jason for the podcast music.
That's me. I did the podcast music. I did it, and I make more music, and it's gonna come out at some point. I'll tell you about it when it does. I've been working
We'll
on
tweet
it.
about it.
I've recorded some guitars, and the _upsides PA on Twitter, the upsides PA on Instagram, and the upsides on SoundCloud, baby.
And follow us, follow Culture Illiterate on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to Culture Illiterate Podcast on YouTube. Follow us at illiterate_pod for Twitter, Instagram, Threads. If we have an account for it, it's going to be illiterate_pod. Reach us at cultureilliteratepod@gmail.com with questions, comments, thoughts. Next episode, we're going to return to the character of Superman for the first time in a little while with a movie that, in case you guys didn't know, is actually intended to be a sequel to the Christopher Reeve Superman films, Superman Returns.